Invasion of the Body Snatchers was first released in 1956. It was directed by Don Siegel, and it starred Kevin McCarthy and Dana Winter. It was based on a series of stories in Collier's magazine by Jack Finney, which was later reprinted as a novel. It tells the story of Dr. Miles Bennell. Now, he has been away from his town that he serves for a couple of weeks at convention, but he gets called back because there are people in town that have a problem. There is some weird phenomena going on. They need their doctor. So he comes back, and at first he starts to think that things are okay. It's just a little bit of a nonsense, really. He doesn't take it too seriously. But as the story unfolds, he starts to realize that there is a strange force at work that might just take over his town, or even worse, might take over the entire world. And what we get from this is one of the best thrillers of the 1950s, one of my favorites. That is Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Let's take a look at it. Before we begin, if you are new to my channel, please consider helping it grow by subscribing. And don't forget to click the bell icon for future notifications. So to me, one of the strengths of this film is the antagonist force. The idea that, as we know, there is a interstellar plant life that comes down to Earth, probably through the rain. It gets into a farmer's field and it grows seed pods. And from these seed pods, a human form of another person grows out of it. And when that happens, they take over the personality of the other person. They duplicate them. That person dies, and this duplicate takes over their identity. But what they don't have is basic human emotions. So they don't feel fear, and they don't feel like anxiety and rage and negative things like that. But they also don't feel joy, and they don't feel rapture and love. They don't have those qualities to their lives. And so it's a terrifying idea in the fact that we can become the monster, and not even a monster that you can see, really, that you can clearly identify. Now, we've covered a lot of films here on this channel. As you know, if you've seen some of my other videos, you know I like monsters. We've had the Blob, we've had the Venus Monster, we've had Godzilla, we've had them all. But this is a unique one because, like I said before, it turns us into the monster. It turns us into a force that is going to become like a hive mind and go out and take over the world and turn it into a joyless, really kind of mindless society of drones. Pretty terrifying stuff, I think. That's one of the strong suits of this film. So, of course, like I said before, it's mostly through the point of view of Dr. Miles Bennell, played by Kevin McCarthy. He's our character, our everyman sort of, that gets swept up into this whole situation. Now, what I like about this story is the structure of it. So you get him coming home. He doesn't really think anything's amiss at first, but there are subtle clues. There's a person over here that says, hey, you know, my uncle isn't acting right. There's something wrong. I don't really think he's who I think he is. Because they can just tell. You know, the idea that you can tell somebody that you're close to, they might be acting off, but if their soul is missing, you can feel that. And that comes out in the dialogue very well. But what really gets things moving is about halfway through the story when he and his girlfriend, played by Dana Winter, they really come to realize this is going on because they witness the seed pods breaking open. They witness the bodies. They know this is happening. And then it becomes a chase story from that point on. They're running for their lives. They're running around town trying to avoid the other people that want to turn them. And also they're trying to find a way to get out of town and find help. And their plight is a forlorn one. They don't have a lot of hope. They're like, let's get to the freeway and maybe flag down somebody that can bring somebody here that we can convince this is going on. And you get the sense from really midway through the story that it's a hopeless kind of situation. And that adds to the tension, I think, and makes it even more interesting. Okay, as always, I got the clipboard of creeps here. Let's take a look at a couple of cool things that I looked up. So, Kevin McCarthy and author Jack Finney, they have always denied the rumor that the story is a statement against McCarthyism and communism. So you understand what that is. Again, this is the mid-1950s, and this was a time when there was the Red Scare in Hollywood, and there was the witch hunts, so to speak, to weed out communist influences. And so Senator McCarthy was one that was spearheading that, and a lot of people got blacklisted. Well, these two, the star and the author, they claim that this really wasn't meant to be a parallel to that. But if you watch the film, you can kind of see where people are coming from if they think that, because it has those overtones to it. But director Don Siegel, he actually says that the references to that are hard to miss. He kind of admits that there is a little bit of that in here, but he says that he tried not to emphasize them in the film. But I think that's an interesting thing to note. Okay, another cool thing was in 1994, this film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. So this is one of those films that will live on for many years because it's being preserved by the Library of Congress. I think that's really great that they pick a genre movie like this. At the time, it was considered a lower budget kind of B movie, but it will be preserved. It has been deemed that. I think that's really neat. So this film actually had a good impact, I think, on the genre of sci-fi thriller. It had some reboots. Now, for my money, the reboots, the remakes, are actually pretty good. This is one of them situations where a remake wasn't a bad thing. Now, I'll be clear. I actually saw the 1978 Donald Sutherland version first. When I was a little kid, it was on TV, and that was my exposure to this idea of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And I'm here to tell you, it freaked me out. It had a big impact on me, specifically that last shot of that version where there's Donald Sutherland and he's screaming at the camera with that weird screech that those versions of the duplicates did in that movie. Flipped me out. So I actually saw that one first, and then it was a couple years later that I caught this version. But I've always appreciated it because there was some subtlety to it. You could see the DNA of how this was the first kind of idea in that world that led to the 70s version, which upped the horror factor in it a little bit. Now, there was another version in 1993 that was just called Body Snatchers. It was a little bit more low-key. It was a little bit less known. But I'll tell you, I think it's a really good film. It takes a different approach, a different setting. It's still the same idea where you have seed pods, you fall asleep, it makes a duplicate of you, it kills you, and then that duplicate takes over your body. It has all that, but it's set in a military base, and it's a little bit more subtle. I personally like it. I recommend it. Honestly, if I ever start to cover films from the 90s, I might consider covering that one because I think it's worth checking out. And lastly, there was a 2007 version that was just called The Invasion and had Nicole Kidman in it. Now, I can't say much about that one. I remember seeing it, but I don't remember it making much of an impact on me, so I don't have much to say about that one, only the fact that it's been 2007 since we've had one of these films. So I got to wonder if another one might be around the corner someday, and I'd be interested in seeing it. I would. All right, so that brings me to my final thoughts on Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This is a key 1950s sci-fi horror film. I happen to believe it is one of the better paced, good characters, scary, visceral type stories that come out of that era. Like I said, the fact that they were able to make the monster a very unseen, very subtle, but still very frightening force, which is basically us turning evil, that's something to think about. That's something to note. That is something that, in my opinion, is terrifying. And they play it up very well in the story. And like I said, it has led to more movies and reboots, and will probably lead to more coming up in the future. But I like this movie a lot. It is a good film. I highly recommend it if you have never seen it. Especially, I will say, my favorite part is the last 5 minutes. It is one of the parts that's kind of iconic, that's stuck in my mind. where Kevin McCarthy's character is running through this freeway just shouting for help, and no one's listening to him. And he's desperate, and like I said before, he's forlorn, and it's hopeless for him. And you see that in the character, and it's terrifying. And I will never forget that image. It's one of them ones that's kind of just stuck in my head, similar to the shocking ending of the remake in the 70s. I'll never forget that image. So both versions, very good movies. I recommend them. All right, thanks again for taking the time to watch my take on Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I really appreciate it. And until the next time, have a good one.